What up, YouTube? Here with a review from yesterday's Wildcard Games of the 2023 NFL Playoffs. The first game I'll be reviewing from yesterday is the game with the New York Giants and the Minnesota Vikings. Now, this was a fun game, fast-paced, offensive-driven game. And if you're a fan of that style of football, then you definitely was entertained from yesterday's game with the New York Giants and the Minnesota Vikings. And the Giants were able to get that upset win over the Vikings, 31-24. And I say upset because the Giants barely made it to the playoffs this season, unlike the Vikings, who had a consistent good regular season and were looking like favorites to possibly win the NFC. And for them to be eliminated within the first round of this year's playoffs was a surprise to a lot of people. Anyways, to review what happened from yesterday's game with the Giants and the Vikings, like I said before, this was a good back and forth active game with the two teams. And Jones, I was impressed with his performance yesterday. He had more rushing yards than the actual running back of the Giants, Saquon Barkley, who's one of the better running backs of today, and he had a successful game versus the Vikings yesterday as well, scoring 2 touchdowns. The Giants scored 4 touchdowns as a team, and 2 of the other touchdowns that the Giants scored were from the receivers, were from throwing passes, and Jones pulled off good completion rate as well. And his game is very good, and he got sacked technically 3 times because when you have a style that Jones has, and he likes to take risks, he likes to run the ball himself a lot, and when you have that kind of style, then he's bound to get hit. That's why he got hit 3 times. And as far as Kirk Cousins go, he had a good game as well. He had a 31 complete passes out of 39 throws. He's one of the better quarterbacks of today as well, accurate with his passes. And the O-line of the Vikings, they've been consistent throughout the regular season, and they were good in this game as well, as Kirk Cousins did not get hit not once in this game. And all the touchdowns that the Vikings scored were from passes from Kirk Cousins. And I think Kirk Cousins drove a rushing touchdown himself once in this game as well. And outside of that, all the other touchdowns that the Vikings scored were from passes from Kirk Cousins, and they scored in total of 3 touchdowns in this game versus the Giants. And the other 3 points were from a kick, a field goal, and I think they only scored 1 field goal, as did the Giants. The Giants scored 4 touchdowns in this game, while the Vikings scored 3, and both teams had 1 field goal. And at the end, the Vikings were looking like they were going to try and catch up. The Giants defense did a great job answering to the pressure, shutting down the Vikings offense to secure that win and move on to next week's NFC divisional games. And they will take on their divisional rivals, the Eagles. And the Eagles are a strong team that's looking like a favorite to possibly win the NFC this year because they had such a good season. I don't know what Jalen Hurts' conditions looking like, because I know he got hurt towards the end of the regular season, so I don't know where his health's at and how he'll perform for next week's game in the divisional rounds versus the New York Giants. And for the Giants to defeat the Vikings, who had a consistent good regular season and were also heavy favorites to go on and possibly win the NFC, the Giants, if they put on a performance like this versus the Eagles, they can possibly pull another upset win versus the Eagles next week. Who knows? Anyways, another factor from this game with the Giants and the Vikings. There were no interceptions and there were no fumbles caused. And yeah, moving on to the next game though. Yeah, the next game I'll be reviewing is a game with the Buffalo Bills and the Miami Dolphins. This game was quite interesting because it turned out to be way more competitive than how I thought it would be, because I thought the Buffalo Bills were going to beat the Dolphins no problem, because the Dolphins didn't have their starting quarterback starting this game yesterday versus the Bills. Tua Tagovailoa, he got injured at the end of the season yet again due to a concussion. Y'all remember in the beginning of the season, the Dolphins were on that high winning streak, and then Tua Tagovailoa, now I don't know if I'm pronouncing his name right, bear with me, but y'all know what I'm talking about. Yeah, he got injured, and the Dolphins throughout the mid part of this season, they were struggling without him. And when he came back into action, that's when they picked up on their slack and turned their luck around, and were back in the playoff picture. And at the end of the regular season, they barely made it to the playoffs. And for him to not be starting versus Buffalo Bills, who are a favorite in the AFC league, and the Buffalo Bills, I say, are a stronghold in the AFC and a strong candidate to win the AFC this season. And to not have Tua Tagovailoa starting versus a strong team like Buffalo Bills, I thought they were out of the picture right then and there, because when they didn't have him as a starting quarterback, they were struggling. And Thompson, he didn't pull off great numbers in this game either. His completion rate was below 50%. However, the Dolphins, they got quite somewhat of a complete team defensively and offensively, and that makes up for the missing aspect of the starting quarterback not starting this game versus the Bills. And how the game went, the first quarter, it was all Buffalo. The Dolphins didn't score nothing in the first quarter. It was 14-0 for the Buffalo Bills to end the first quarter. And then the second quarter, that's when the Dolphins started to catch up. They scored a touchdown offensively and defensively. They caused a fumble to score a touchdown defensively. And to end the first half, the Buffalo Bills went on a good last drive, put themselves in a good position to where they could score a field goal to end the first half with a 3-point lead. And then the second half, it was good back and forth action with the two teams. And then the Miami Dolphins, during their last run, they made a mistake where it was 4th and 1, and they let the clock run out, and that caused a delay of game, and the refs threw a flag for that, and then they got drove back 5 yards. And I'm not saying they could have made that play on 4th and 1. However, that's a better position than a 4th and 5. And the Buffalo Bills, overall, they scored 4 touchdowns, while the Dolphins scored 3 touchdowns. Singletary, he didn't score a touchdown. One of the touchdowns came from Cook, and that was the only rushing touchdown that the Buffalo Bills scored. And the Miami Dolphins, like I said, made 3 touchdowns. 2 of them came from offense, while the other one that I already talked about came from a defense. Came from a fumble that the Buffalo Bills fumbled the ball with the Dolphins defense rushing them, and then that's how they scored a touchdown. Like I said, it was a close game, 34-31. And shout out to the Dolphins for making this game more competitive than I thought. They really made up for that missing quarterback factor from yesterday's game versus the Buffalo Bills. Anyways, moving on to the next game from yesterday, and that's the game with the Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens. Yeah, now this was a good fun game with the Bengals and the Ravens, with the final score being 24-17 for the Bengals. They'll move on to the AFC divisional rounds versus the Buffalo Bills. This game had a dramatic last touchdown where the Ravens were in great field position to where if they were to score that touchdown on that drive, they could have taken the lead, and Huntley, who was trying to dive in to score a touchdown. However, that attempt was blocked by the Bengals defense, and that block caused a fumble, and then Hubbard picked up that fumble ball to run it almost 100 yards to score that touchdown. That was the highlight reel play of this game. And I know that had to feel good for Hubbard, who's actually from Cincinnati, and this game was in Cincinnati, and for him to have that highlight reel play of that game, I know that had to have been a feel good moment. And the Bengals did a good job at the last few minutes of the game, where they were able to shut down the Ravens' attempt at trying to catch up. And yeah, Joe Burrows, he had one touchdown pass, and he drove a touchdown, a rushing touchdown himself as well. And then the other touchdown, as I mentioned before, came from the defense of the Bengals. And then Huntley, he threw 2 touchdown passes, and there was no rushing touchdowns from the Ravens. And I don't know if Lamar Jackson, if he would have started this game versus the Bengals, the Ravens could have had a better chance to possibly win this game versus the Bengals. However, the Bengals, I mean, they were the AFC champions last year, and we know that they're a strong team in the AFC, and a strong team like the Bengals, they're always in contention to win the AFC every year that they're in the playoffs. Anyways, the Bengals and the Bills, that should be a good game for the AFC divisional rounds next week. Y'all let me know what y'all opinions are from all the games that we saw yesterday. Comment, subscribe, share, like, all that good stuff. And that does it for this video. I'm out of here, y'all. Peace.